Okay, so in today's class, we're going to be making beekeeper's pain de mie. Pain meaning bread, de mie referring to the softness. So it's a soft bread. We're going to start out with the all-purpose flour. No need to sift it. It's good to go. We're also going to use lukewarm water. That lukewarm water is going to help activate the yeast. We're using instant yeast today. And we're also going to be using salt. Very important in bread. Without that salt, it's not going to have very much flavor at all. We're also going to be using unsalted butter. We always use unsalted butter in a professional bake shop. Make sure that butter is super soft. We're also going to use room temperature milk. We want to make sure that's whole milk. And we're also going to be using honey. So let's go ahead and put the yeast in the lukewarm water. And we're going to stir that around a little bit. That's going to help to dissolve the yeast. It's also going to wake up the yeast and start its reaction. We're also going to go ahead and put the salt in the flour. Let's go ahead and give that a quick stir. I like to put the salt in first and stir it around before I put the yeast in. I don't like having the yeast come in direct contact with that much salt at one time if you don't stir it up. Okay, so let's go ahead and put that flour and salt mixture into our mixing bowl. Let's go ahead and add our yeast water mixture. Go ahead and stir it around, make sure everything's dissolved. By dissolving it in the water, it's going to incorporate into your bread much easier. Let's go ahead and use the room temperature milk. Make sure that's whole milk. And let's go ahead and put our honey in. Now the honey is going to do a couple different things. It's going to add sweetness, it's going to add flavor, it's going to add some moisture. But it's also going to be food for the yeast to help activate the yeast, help it grow. And the honey is also going to help shorten the gluten strands that would normally form in bread dough. So the honey, the butter, and the milk are going to help shorten those gluten strands, and that's going to give us a softer bread. So the difference between an enriched bread and a lean bread is the fat and the sugar that we've added. Okay, so let's go ahead and add our butter. Make sure that butter is super soft. If it's not going to incorporate fully into the bread dough that we're making. And if we have chunks of butter, it's just going to melt when we bake the bread, and you'll end up with holes in your sandwich bread, and we don't want that. Okay, so after we've mixed it with the dough hook for about 5 minutes, we're going to go ahead and take it off of the mixer. Now, this is a fairly small batch of bread, so it's kind of hard for it to mix properly in the bowl. So we're going to finish kneading it by hand. So notice there's no flour down on the table, and I'm kneading by pushing the dough ball forward, turning at 90 degrees, pulling back, and then pushing forward again, and just keep that rotation going of pushing forward, rotating 90 degrees, and then push it back. I'm going to do this for about 3-4 minutes. Okay, you're going to see the bread get much smoother, and it's going to be more consistent in the texture, and we're ready to go. Okay, so you see that nice smooth surface on the top? That's what we want. All right, so let's go ahead and spray the inside of our bowl that we're going to do our bulk fermentation in. And we're going to put the nice side down onto the bowl, stir it around a little bit, turn it over. We want to keep the nice side of the dough facing up. Okay, that's going to help us later when we're forming our loaf. I like to cover with plastic wrap. If you don't, the bread is going to dry out. It's going to form a crust, and we don't want that to happen yet. All right, so I left it bulk ferment for about 90 minutes. And now I'm going to turn the nice side over, and I'm going to pat it out to it's not quite as wide as the loaf pan that I'm going to put it in. Notice that I'm keeping it in a rectangular shape, a little shorter than the length of the pan. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is so that when I roll it up, it will fit with no problem. So I'm going to start with the edge further away from me, roll forward, and then I'm going to turn it to its side. The seam that's on the bottom, I'm going to use the side of my hand to go ahead and seal that seam. If I don't, it could possibly unroll. I've seen that happen before, so people that don't seal it. And we're just going to roll it out till we have a nice even log. And if you don't roll it out, you could have one end be a lot larger than the other end or misformed. So let's go ahead and spray our loaf pan with some fat. You could also butter the pan if you like, but it's much easier with the spray. Make sure you have the seam side facing down. We're going to cover it with plastic wrap again. I like to put the time on there so I remember what time I started the final proofing stage. It's going to take about a good 90 minutes to 2 hours for this bread to proof. Okay, so once the bread has gone through its final proofing, we're going to test it to see if it's done. Press your finger into it. If it comes back slightly, it's good to go. Okay, so let's go ahead and put it into an oven, 425 for about a half an hour. We're going to test it to see if it's done, and we're going to use a thermometer to test it. We're looking for around 200 degrees. Around 190, the bread goes from a dough to a finished baked bread. So if we're shooting for 200, we know we hit that mark. Let's go ahead and take the finished bread out of that hot pan. If we leave it in too long, condensation is going to start to form in the bottom of our loaf. We're going to let it cool for about 10 minutes before we cut it. The reason why we want it to cool is the gelatinization hasn't completely finished. If you cut bread while it's too hot, where you cut it, it will actually be kind of gummy. Okay, so with this recipe, I actually cut the recipe size in half. So you could easily double this recipe and have a much larger loaf and use the same loaf pan with no problem whatsoever. I'm going to use the jam that I made over the summer, the peach jam, and enjoy this nice soft bread that we just made. Still slightly warm out of the oven. Let's give it a try. Yep, it was good. I hope you enjoyed this recipe. Let me know what you think. You guys have a great day.